My name is Niklas Becker, and I'm from the DWD, Deutscher Wetterdienst. And today I'm going to present my work that I'm doing as part of the ITMS program with my colleagues that are listed here. And we're going to be talking about concurrent data assimilation of methane concentrations and fluxes. Okay, what is the motivation? As part of the ITMS program, our job is the validation of national greenhouse gas inventories. So, for example, Germany or most countries part of the IPCC have to report greenhouse gas emissions in a yearly manner to see if we are actually reducing greenhouse gases. And our job is to check these inventories, to validate them. So we put them into models, for example, the weather model of the DWD. And then we compare the predictions of these models to actual observations. For example, shown here to tower observations or aircraft observations of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And then we see how much greenhouse gases is Germany emitting. That is the goal of the project. And today we're going to be just talking about tower measurements here. So we want to validate methane emissions. So we need to model methane emissions and transport in the atmosphere. And we use the German Weather Service numerical weather prediction model ICAN-ART over Europe only. So we have this little slice here of the world. And of course, since this is a local area, we need the boundary conditions for the methane that is coming into the domain. So it's a huge problem. There are uncertainties in the initial conditions, in the boundary conditions, in the transport of the methane, and of course also in the emissions. So what we try to do is we try to assimilate the concentrations and the emissions at the same time so that the method or the model itself can figure out the uncertainties in there. And that is the approach here, where we want to use data assimilation because these tools can manage these large data sets. For example, we have a domain of 500,000 grid points and then 74 layers here, and that's a lot of data, and data assimilation can fortunately handle it. So what do we specifically do? We use an LATKF, a local ensemble transform Kalman filter, and we can run the numerical weather prediction in ensemble mode. And in this way, we obtain an ensemble of predictions, and we vary the concentrations and the emissions in these ensemble members. And then the LATKF can figure out what is the best choice, or what can mimic reality the best. And we have a composite state vector where we have the concentrations and the emissions in there. And then we basically assimilate in the LATKF through the correlation. The observation operator only needs to see the concentrations, but through the correlations with the emissions, the method can figure out what is the best emission field. So how do we get an ensemble of emissions? We only get the best guess of the emissions from each country or from different data sets. Some of these data sets have uncertainties in them, but they are always a little difficult to interpret. So what we do is we sum up all of our emissions in our domain, and then we perturb them with a realization of a Gaussian random field. And these Gaussian random fields are one of these examples is shown here. Basically, on every point, we have a Gaussian random number, and they are correlated with the neighboring points. And this correlation structure depends on distance. And here we have a power law function. So that means the further away they are, the smaller the correlations. But they are basically, like mathematically, there are correlations on all scales. And yeah, we do that 100 times with 100 different realizations of this kind of field. And then we get a emission field that is perturbed up and down in some parts. And then we put that into our model. A single assimilation step can look like this. First, we assimilate around the data from the IQUAS sub-ground stations, which are the blue stars here. And then we can see the mass analysis increase for example, how the concentrations of methane change. And at the same time, we can see the emission analysis increase, how the emissions change in one assimilation step. And the nice thing about this is, for example, here you can see the concentrations are corrected downward, while the emissions are corrected upward. So the method seems to be able to figure out, or can in principle figure out, oh, this has to, here I can correct the emissions, and some other place, oh, here I can only correct the concentrations. And yeah, we use observations from like during the daytime most of the and during the nighttime for mountain stations. So what does this look like? We assimilate daily, and for each day here is shown the German total emission estimate. And each day we get a new estimate. The uncertainties are from the ensemble size. And then we simulate over a month and average over the month and use this as an estimate of the German emissions. And you can see here the change in posterior to prior. For example, in northwestern Germany, the method predicts a large increase in the methane prior. Here you see the relative standard deviation of the posterior or the uncertainty. And you can see around the observation sites, we have a decrease in the relative standard deviation. And further out, there is no information gain because of the localization of the LATKF. Here I've shown a comparison. If we only assimilate concentrations, it's shown in blue. And if we assimilate concentrations and emissions at the same time, it's in orange. And you see the scale score here. If we assimilate both at the same time, we have a much better increase of the or the decrease of the RMSE error, so the method can perform much better. And yeah, so another thing, for example, here, there's an increase in the uncertainty actually, and this is where Katowice is, with the Upper Silesian coal basin is, which is a large point source of methane. And for example, for these point sources, the method does not work very well. I can go into the details later if there's questions, but yeah, it's better suited for emissions that are spread out over some area. Here we compare again if we only assimilate concentrations versus if we assimilate both concentrations and emissions. Because as I've said, in principle, it's possible that the method corrects emissions downward and concentrations upward and like they diverge in some way. So how does the method use this newfound freedom? You can see here the difference in how much mass is being corrected. The concentration assimilation corrects a lot of mass over Germany. And the concurrent assimilation on average corrects less mass. That's the comparison between the orange and the blue curve here. And if we get the difference between these curves and convert them to the emissions that corresponds to, that is the orange curve here. It's very nice to see that this is pretty much aligns with how many emissions are being corrected in Germany. So the concurrent assimilation needs to correct less mass because it increases the emissions in Germany, which that was the goal, but this is a sanity check that this works. And you can see here the average mass increase at an assimilation step. And here, if we only assimilate concentrations, we have a large red blob over Germany because it always has to correct mass upward. If we assimilate emissions at the same time, the large red blob gets smaller because we are correcting emissions upward in Germany, for example, especially around the Western Germany. So this is like a sanity check. The method uses the newfound freedom to actually produce something useful, like to not go in opposite directions. Okay, so I've talked about the Gaussian random field a bit already, and about the correlation structure. And this Gaussian random field is characterized by a power law, and this power law effectively controls the correlation length. You can see here there's a bunch of smaller blobs, while for a larger negative power law, we have a bunch of bigger blobs. And this translates to the correlation length in the emission increase. As can be seen here, if we have the larger blobs here, they also translate to larger blobs when we assimilate emissions. The question is now, what is the best power law? What is the correct assumption here? And you can see here in this plot, larger negative power law, which means larger blobs, also means larger corrections, especially in the beginning. You can see here in the posterior, visually, it's not that easy to spot a difference, or like so there are smaller special differences between the different power laws, but you can see in the relative increase of the posterior to what the prior, that the larger correlation length seems on average much smoother compared to the smaller power laws. So the spatial distribution is also very similar, but the overall correction can be affected. Like this is the emissions in Germany. The overall corrections are affected by the choice of power law. There are here I've shown the skill score and the average RMSE skill score, and you can see that the larger power law actually performs a little bit better, but the difference are very small and actually like depend on the day, basically. So yeah, we've actually for now chosen to go with the k to the minus 4.4 power law because it's like a conservative choice where we have smaller correlation length. And that's what I'm going to show results for, but that is still an open question. What is the best power law for perturbation? Here's some quick results. If we run this over a year in 2021 to estimate the methane emissions in Germany, which is shown here. In the dashed lines is the prior, and we actually see an increase with regard to the prior, especially in the winter month or in the fall month. And this line is in blue, and in purple is a result from a colleague of mine that is also working in our group. And you can see the methods agree very much. His one is a synthesis inversion method, very different to the data assimilation, but it's nice that they seem to get similar results. And yeah, you can also see, for example, in Poland, where we have the Katowice, the large point source, that the methods here are different because of the treatment of these point sources. Which brings me to the summary. The concurrent data assimilation of concentrations and fluxes works. We have a very similar result to other methods. What I've shown here is that we can only correct the emissions localized around the observation sites. So we would like to add satellite data to correct in the whole emission. And the question that I'm asking myself that I want to answer is, what is the best emission perturbation ansatz for this problem? Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. We again do not have many time for questions. I'll pick one from Ludwig Wolfgruber. How big is the impact of boundary conditions in contrast to observations over the runtime of a month?
It actually seems like the transport uncertainty dominates at the observation sites. So I've done a test where I've also perturbed the boundary conditions with a Gaussian random field, but it seems like the transport uncertainty, whether the wind transports the concentrations dominates over the boundary condition uncertainty.
Okay, then I'll abuse my power to ask a question I have. From what you were showing on slide 7 and 8, it seemed that the German emissions were quite a bit higher than initially expected, and secondly, that almost only Germany had higher than expected emissions in all of Europe. Slide 7 or 8, I think that was.
Yeah. Yes. What is the question?
Yeah, is it true? So is Germany producing a lot more methane than we thought?
It seems like it. Like the method predicts an increase in Germany, in northwestern Germany, and also the Benelux states. It seems like Great Britain has a better match with the inventory, and in France, depending on the method, some people see a larger increase, some people are closer to the inventory. But yes, that is what we're working on right now. How confident are we in these results?
Okay, thank you.